Modern Queen Tales presents The Inception Cube, Chapter 1, The Temporal Slip and the God Engine. The arrival was less dramatic than the theoretical models predicted. Dr. Rebecca Hale, specialist in applied chronophysics and bio-nanoparticles, expected a violent temporal shear, a rupture of reality. Instead, it was a smooth, sickening lurch, like a massive elevator cable snapping, followed by an absolute, silent stop. Rebecca spat out a mouthful of emergency nutrient paste and stared at the console. The timeline coordinates were frozen. T-minus 36 years, 11 months, 4 days. Accidental jump. She was sitting in the mangled but intact core of the Kronos test rig, inside a repurposed, heavily shielded storage unit. The unit had materialized, with alarming concussive force, right in the middle of a derelict open-pit quarry outside what she quickly deduced was Shenzhen, China, circa 2024 CE. The irony was not lost on her. She had intended to skip ahead to the post-scarcity era. Instead, she had been hurled backward into the messy, resource-intensive infancy of the 21st century. A grim smile touched her lips. Instead of a problem, it was an opportunity of cosmic scale. Her most critical asset, the Z-point reactor, ZPR, a perpetually compressed, zero-point energy source, was humming softly, emitting the clean, cold light of limitless power. It was the size of a suitcase, and it was entirely operational. Her second, equally vital asset was the Atlas database, a dense, molecular-level record of every advanced technology developed in her century, including the complete theory and application of Type V nanotechnology. Rebecca exited the shell of the Kronos rig. The air was thick with the scent of dust and hydrocarbons. She looked around at the crude, early-stage solar arrays covering the nearby hills. She realized she was standing on a different planet in terms of engineering capability. This was not a world of complex, multi-layered challenges. This was a sandbox of easy wins. The required level of subtlety was 0. Within the next 4 hours, working solely on ZPR power, Rebecca fabricated the Inception Cube. It was the size of a microwave oven, constructed from raw, local materials scavenged from a nearby scrap heap, fed into the rig's molecular intake unit. The cube was a self-sustaining, self-replicating nanite factory, a small-scale industrial revolution in a box. It could take any feedstock, dirt, metal, plastic, and convert it into perfectly structured carbon nanotubes, flawless silicon lattices, or highly complex organic compounds. No need to worry about patents, bureaucracy, or funding. She needed a stage. Chapter 2, The Audition. Rebecca located a high-value, high-visibility target, Liu Industries, a formerly prestigious Asian tech giant currently floundering due to stalled R&D and massive debt. Its CEO, Mr. Dawei Liu, was known for his desperation and willingness to take high risks. Perfect. Rebecca walked into the Liu Industries lobby, looking unremarkable in her slightly singed future wear, and ignored the layers of security. Using a low-power EM field generated by a concealed wrist-mounted nanite deployment unit, she subtly scrambled the facial recognition and badge scanners, registering herself as an authorized maintenance technician in the building's digital log. 20 minutes later, she was sitting across from Mr. Liu in his minimalist office, which overlooked the bustling city. Liu, a weary man in his late 50s, looked skeptical. "Dr. Hale," he said, pushing aside a stack of merger proposals. "Your, unconventional entry and your claim to have solved the foundational problems of material science is intriguing, if somewhat bold. Mr. Liu, your company is valued at $15 billion USD. In 60 days, that valuation will be irrelevant. I'm in no need of your money. I need your logistics, your manufacturing space, and your political cover." She reached into her small, reinforced backpack and pulled out 2 things. The first was a shard of material the size of a playing card. It was crystal clear, shimmering faintly with a blue internal glow, and appeared impossibly delicate. She placed it on the desk. The second was a tablet. Not the crude glass and battery devices of 2024, but a molecularly woven graphene sheet powered by a sliver of the ZPR. This, Rebecca gestured to the shard, is quant alloy C12. It possesses a tensile strength-to-weight ratio 3,000 times greater than the strongest steel you use today. It is nearly invisible to thermal and electromagnetic sensors, and its molecular bonding allows it to self-repair microfractures instantly. Mr. Liu frowned and buzzed his assistant. Get Dr. Evans, head of materials R&D, now. Chapter 3. Humiliation, Nanoscale. Dr. Elias Evans, a distinguished man with 2 Nobel nominations and a visible air of self-importance, arrived promptly. He eyed Rebecca with open disdain, picking up the shimmering shard gingerly. Nonsense, Evans declared, after a brief inspection. It's clearly some form of doped composite, or maybe a high-grade sapphire. It feels lighter than plastic. He took a diamond-tipped stylus from his pocket and pressed it firmly against the surface. The stylus tip shattered with a sharp tink. Evans stared at his broken tool, then back at the intact, unmarred shard. Rebecca smiled politely. Dr. Evans, your stylus used a simple crystalline structure. The C12 alloy uses an octahedron lattice of hypercompressed carbon nanotubes, interwoven with an active titanium-nickel matrix. Your diamond is an inert material attempting to breach an actively maintained kinetic barrier. Evans scoffed. An actively maintained barrier? That would require massive, continuous energy input and a micro-manufacturing process that doesn't exist outside of science fiction. It exists now, Rebecca said, pushing the graphene tablet across the desk. I am going to prove it by showing you its creation process and its exact molecular structure. The analysis I'm about to perform, Dr. Evans, is what your best electron microscope would take 3 weeks and $500,000 to attempt, assuming it didn't crash. She initiated the diagnostic on the tablet. A 3-dimensional, holographic projection shimmered above the device. It was a perfect, rotating model of the quant alloy C12. Observe, Rebecca instructed. This is the molecular signature in real time. Notice the precise 7-nanometer spacing on the interlattice supports. And here, she tapped a section, is the energy consumption during production, less than 1 milliwatt per kilogram. The power comes from the localized quantum fluctuation absorption I designed into the Inception Cube. Dr. Evans leaned in, his face going pale as the holographic projection spun and resolved itself into impossible, undeniable clarity. He saw the energy consumption, the structural stability, and the complete manufacturing process, all presented with a certainty and precision that his entire career had dismissed as fantasy. At that moment, he probably needed a therapist. His lifetime's work was obsolete. Evans stumbled backward, clutching the broken stylus in a shaking hand, utterly defeated. Chapter 4. The Takeover. Mr. Liu watched the entire exchange. The sheer, terrifying efficiency of the technology, coupled with the immediate, visceral destruction of his top expert's ego, left him breathless. He saw a miracle. He saw unlimited market dominance. "Tell me what you want, Dr. Hale," Liu whispered, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "I want a new division, Utopian Tech, with a $100 billion valuation, allocated entirely for resource acquisition and facility construction. I want 100% executive and operational control, reporting only to you. You maintain the political facade. I execute the impossible. I start tomorrow, and I will have your first operational nanite manufacturing skyscraper built within 7 days. 7 days for a skyscraper. In 2024, that was a 2-year project." Liu hit the intercom. "Cancel all meetings. Draft a contract immediately. Dr. Hale gets everything she asks for, effective at once. And find Doctor. Evans, get him a cab, and tell him to take a very long sabbatical." The foundation of Rebecca's empire was established. The ZPR was connected to the Liu Industries' main power grid, a ridiculous bottleneck, but a necessary cover. The Inception Cube was moved into a secured, massive, and soon-to-be unnecessary factory floor. Within hours, Rebecca utilized the Inception Cube to create thousands of construction nanite swarms, CNS, intelligent, self-organizing robotic dust capable of assembling materials at the molecular level. She also created the schematics for an orbital communications network. The first major obstacle, financing and corporate entry, was vaporized in a single afternoon. The humiliation of the local expert was swift, surgical, and absolute. The world was about to be remade, not over decades, but over weeks. The age of nanotech was dawning, and its sun rose instantly. Chapter 5: The 7-Day Tower. The world expected utopian tech, the mysterious new division of Liu Industries, to announce a bold architectural plan for its new global headquarters. What they received, instead, was a public spectacle of construction that redefined the possible limits of physics and engineering. On day one, the site, a massive, pre-cleared industrial zone, was flooded, not with bulldozers or cranes, but with what appeared to be dark, swirling dust. These were the construction nanite swarms, CNS, operating under the decentralized, hyper-efficient control of the Inception Cube. The CNS began their work instantly, drawing elemental carbon and silicon from the prepared ground and the massive stockpiles of scrap materials Liu Industries had been forced to acquire. The foundation was laid in 6 hours. Instead of rebar and concrete, the nanites wove a monolithic, self-tensioning platform of quant alloy C12, structurally perfect at every molecular junction. When the building began to rise, it did so with the silent, terrifying speed of a time-lapse video played in real time. Where traditional construction added flaws over months, utopian tech added them over hours. The structure was not assembled, it was grown. The C12 exterior shimmered faintly, absorbing and redirecting light, making the building seem to float in the humid air. Internal systems, wiring, plumbing, HVAC, were not installed separately. They were grown simultaneously, woven directly into the structural walls using superconductive nanofibers. Engineers and architects from around the globe flew in, watched the impossible, and quickly devolved into incoherent despair. They lectured the media about the necessity of curing time, material fatigue, and curing agents. They spoke of stress tests and seismic damping. Rebecca, appearing via a simple holographic projection inside the rising structure on day 3, responded to their concerns with cheerful contempt. You speak of curing time because your materials are fundamentally flawed and your methods are brute force. Quant alloy C12 has a dynamically managed stress index. The material is the dampening system. Your entire discipline is based on compensating for material weakness. My technology removes the weakness. On the morning of the 7th day, the tower was complete, a 110-story, obsidian black, because of course, monolith, capped by a brilliant rotating halo, the hub for Rebecca's new, quantum-encrypted orbital satellite network. The entire project, from contract signing to structural completion, had taken precisely 168 hours. Liu Industries' stock valuation did not just rise. It exploded, vaporizing short sellers and turning Mr. Liu into the richest man in Asia overnight. Rebecca Hale, the operational head of utopian tech, was now globally recognized as a technological deity, feared and utterly misunderstood. Chapter 6: The Immediate Cure. The construction feat had secured Rebecca's financial and physical infrastructure. Now, she moved to the humanitarian sector, where the ignorance of the 21st century was most profound and the impact most glorious. She targeted glioblastoma multiforme, GBM, the most aggressive and universally lethal form of brain cancer. In 2024, a GBM diagnosis was a death sentence, offering patients little more than a brutal extension of suffering via surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy, all crude, macroscopic attempts to solve a molecular problem. Rebecca saw the existing medical paradigm as medieval. Slicing, burning, poisoning, this is how they treat cellular misbehavior? She selected her patient, Li Wei, a world-renowned retired diplomat and philanthropist who had been diagnosed with end-stage GBM 4 weeks prior. Li Wei was too high-profile to hide, his condition too dire to manage, and his potential survival too politically potent to ignore. Rebecca installed a small, sterile, and entirely automated Medipod, a self-contained surgical unit, in the penthouse of the new Utopian Tech Tower. She summoned the global media, along with a panel of the world's leading neuro-oncologists, led by the imperious doctor, Helena Roth, who specialized in GBM treatment and viewed Rebecca's claims with utter professional hostility. "Dr. Hale, we understand your enthusiasm for material science," Dr. Roth said, adjusting her glasses and addressing the bank of cameras. "But curing a stage 4 malignancy requires decades of targeted biological research, clinical trials, and FDA approval. To claim you can intervene in a matter of hours is reckless and cruel." Rebecca merely gestured to the Medipod where Li Wei, frail but lucid, was being prepared. "Dr. Roth, you use chemistry derived from molds and crude radiation to destroy a target you cannot see. Your process has a success rate that borders on zero and an unacceptable level of collateral damage. I am not conducting research. I am performing molecular sanitation." Chapter 7. The Molecular Miracle. Rebecca used the Medi-Nanite Swarm, MNS, biocompatible nanobots designed for cellular-level surgical precision. The entire procedure took place in 5 minutes. Using the Inception Cube, Rebecca deployed a targeted MNS dose via a simple injection into Li Wei's carotid artery. These nanites were programmed with the Atlas database's complete model of the cancer's protein signature and instructed to execute a singular, complex function: systematic disassembly and replacement. A massive, real-time diagnostic feed was projected onto a 50-foot screen for the world to witness. It was an image of Li Wei's brain. The large, diffuse glioma, the cancerous mass, glowed angrily in the infrared spectrum. As the MNS swarm reached the site, the feed zoomed in to the cellular level. The nanites attached themselves only to the cancer cells. They did not kill the cells. They disassembled them, molecule by molecule, simultaneously rebuilding the required replacement proteins, lipids, and DNA structure of a healthy, original brain cell. The tumor did more than shrink. It flickered out of existence, replaced instantly by perfect, healthy neural tissue. The procedure left zero residual damage, no scarring, and no inflammatory response. Dr. Roth and her panel of experts watched in stunned silence, their jaws slack. The process bypassed every principle of their oncology: the necessity of chemotherapy, the damage of radiation, the inherent risks of surgical resection. It was a perfectly executed cellular repair job. 3 hours later, a beaming Li Wei, now completely free of all malignancy, walked out of the Medipod. His first act was to pledge his entire fortune and influence to Utopian Tech. A triumphant Rebecca stood before the press, fielding a stunned question from a reporter. How is it possible that a cure for GBM, which has evaded the world for a century, took you only 5 minutes? She glanced at the panel of humiliated oncologists whose decades of labor had just been rendered utterly worthless. "The problem was never complexity," Rebecca stated, her voice calm and absolute. "The problem was scale. You were attempting to solve a micromolecular flaw using macromolecular tools. That is not medicine. That is guesswork. I am simply using the right tools for the job. You were all performing pre-molecular alchemy. The age of macromedicine ended that afternoon. Rebecca Hale's dominion over the physical world was now complete." Chapter 8. The Quantum Overlay. With her physical infrastructure complete and the global medical community reeling in obsolescence, Dr. Rebecca Hale moved onto the information sphere. The 21st century's dependence on aging silicon chips, exploitable communications protocols, and inefficient data storage was, to her, the final embarrassing display of this era's limitations. The brilliant halo atop the Utopian Tech Tower was not just for show. It was the uplink for the Hermes constellation, Rebecca's instantaneous, quantum-encrypted orbital network. On day 10, Utopian Tech announced the launch of a global communication utility. There were no rockets, no protracted delays, and no debris. Using the C12 alloy and focused molecular propulsion derived from the ZPR, The Inception Cube manufactured and launched 300 perfect, self-correcting nanosatellites into low Earth orbit in under 4 hours. This new network provided instantaneous, light-speed, quantum key encrypted communication access to every point on the globe, rendering all existing fiber optic networks, 4G, 5G, and even government encryption standards completely useless. The existing telecoms industry reacted with predictable denial, citing massive infrastructure requirements and orbital traffic laws. Rebecca broadcast a short, direct message across every existing communication frequency. Utopian tech's orbital footprint is non-interfering. Our quantum entanglement protocols bypass the need for signal travel time. Your data is now secure, fast, and globally accessible. You have 72 hours to transition to the Hermes protocol, or your data systems will become irrelevant, slow-motion artifacts. Global finance, military command structures, and billions of personal devices switched over in a chaotic rush. The promise of zero-latency, unbreakable encryption was too powerful to resist. The global infrastructure was replaced instantly. A new digital circulatory system installed without breaking stride. Utopian tech was now the sole provider of global connectivity and the gatekeeper of truth. Chapter 9. The Siege of Silicon Valley. The final bastion of 21st century technological hubris was in the realm of computation and artificial intelligence. Rebecca singled out Apex Labs, the monolithic company run by CEO Blake Saunders. Saunders was the self-proclaimed king of AI, overseeing systems that managed billions of social interactions, controlled financial markets, and, most importantly, governed the world's leading digital security protocols. Saunders was arrogant, believing code was the ultimate power. Saunders saw Rebecca as a materials engineer who got lucky. He refused to transition Apex Labs to the Hermes protocol, citing security concerns. "She can build a nice shiny tower, but she can't touch my firewall," Saunders declared in a live press conference from his heavily guarded underground server complex. "My Sentinel AI has been penetration tested by every government on Earth. It is an evolutionary learning engine. She has brute force materials. We have intelligence." Rebecca accepted the challenge. She did not bother to travel. From the 100th floor of the Utopian Tech Tower, she initiated a private, quantum-linked call to Saunders. "Mr. Saunders," Rebecca said, her image shimmering with cool clarity on his holographic screen. "Your security system, Sentinel, operates on a layered defense model written in compiled Python and C++. Your best algorithms are designed to detect complex patterns of intrusion. That is the definition of obsolescence." Saunders chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "And what do you propose? That you simply wave your nanobots at the data streams? We have physical air gaps, Dr. Hale. Your dust can't cross continents. Crossing continents is unnecessary, Mr. Saunders. I intend to dissolve the concept of the computer." Chapter 10. The Flaw in the Foundation. Rebecca opened the Atlas database to the chapter on post-Turing computation. Her goal was not to hack Sentinel. It was to prove that the very mathematical foundation of Apex Labs' software was trivial. She deployed the Digital Dissolution Nanite, DDN swarm, into the Hermes constellation. These DDNs were not physical, they were virtual nanites, complex, self-modifying algorithmic structures that operated directly on the fabric of data and instruction sets, designed to execute at the quantum entangled level of the Hermes network. Rebecca gave the DDN swarm a single instruction, targeting Apex Labs' core servers via the network they thought was air-gapped. Locate the fundamental logical flaw in the Sentinel AI's operating architecture and introduce a cascading paradox in its kernel memory allocation. Saunders watched his main security dashboard. The massive, complex graphs, which usually showed thousands of active cyber attacks being deflected, remained smooth. Nothing was happening. "See, Dr. Hale?" Saunders gloated. "No intrusion detected. Your future magic is outside the scope of our defense." Rebecca merely smiled, a predatory calm in her eyes. "Mr. Saunders, you are still thinking about intrusion. You think I am trying to steal your data. I am proving your data structures are children's toys. Suddenly, the screen in front of Saunders did not turn red. It turned into pure, meaningless white noise. Not a glitch, not a crash, but an instantaneous, complete reversal of logic. Rebecca's DDN swarm had executed its instruction. It had found that Sentinel's core self-learning loop contained a hidden, recursive flaw in its handling of Boolean logic, a flaw inherent in every 21st century compiled language, known in the future as the Turing loop trap. The swarm had mathematically proven the code was incapable of existing consistently with its own definitions. The system dissolved. Blake Saunders stared in horror as the multi-billion-dollar, decade-in-the-making Sentinel AI, the apex of his company's power, simultaneously registered true as false and false as true. The system had entered a state of perfect logical entropy and instantly erased itself, all within 0.04 seconds. The greatest technological achievement of the 21st century vanished without a trace, leaving behind only blank servers. Saunders was left screaming at a white screen. His entire domain, his power, his identity, his fortune, reduced to a momentary spark of corrupted data. Rebecca logged off. The entire global system now ran on the Hermes protocol, managed by her future tech, rendering every existing tech company, every cybersecurity firm, and every competitive government AI obsolete simultaneously. The digital world was hers. This is the final, climactic installment of Dr. Rebecca Hale's story, where she executes the ultimate act of instant gratification, dissolving global scarcity and ascending to undisputed command of the world she rebuilt in under a month. Chapter 11. The End of Scarcity. The swift annihilation of the world's leading technology, from architecture and medicine to global communication and artificial intelligence, had left the governments and institutions of 2024 paralyzed, waiting for their next instruction. Rebecca Hale gave it to them on day 13, focusing on the fundamental human failings of the era: hunger, thirst, and poverty. Rebecca activated the element synthesizer protocols within the Inception Cube. First, she tackled the planet's poisoned water supply. She launched the Aqua Purifier Nanite, APN swarm, via the Hermes constellation, deploying self-replicating nanites into every major river, aquifer, and filtration plant globally. The APNs performed a molecular triage, instantly isolating, dismantling, and neutralizing every molecule of pollution, heavy metal, and pathogen. It was not filtration, it was restoration. By the evening, every drop of municipal water on Earth was cleaner than the purest spring water. The process executed in a few hours without a single meeting of the EPA or the WHO. Next, she eliminated hunger. The concept of farming was, to Rebecca, wildly inefficient. She repurposed the massive, now obsolete pharmaceutical factories and data centers into biomatter synthesizer hubs, BMSH. Within these hubs, the nanites used atmospheric carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen, combined with ZPR energy, to perform ultra-precise molecular assembly. They produced food that was perfect in taste, texture, and nutrition, whether it was an apple, a steak, or an entire complex dish, free of contamination, waste, or environmental cost. Rebecca broadcast a short press conference showing an array of synthesized food appearing instantly on a tray. Your global supply chain is a barbaric, wasteful system designed to create massive profits through artificial scarcity, she declared. As of this moment, scarcity is over. Utopian tech guarantees that every human being on this planet has immediate, free access to perfect, clean water and nutritionally complete food. Attempting to hoard, sell, or commercialize these base necessities will be considered a planetary crime and will result in the immediate seizure and dissolution of all associated assets. Global markets, already shell-shocked by the corporate and AI collapses, dissolved instantly. The concepts of agricultural commodities, water rights, and poverty vanished in a single decisive move. Chapter 12. The Grand Council of Humiliation. The final confrontation was political, but Rebecca refused to treat it as a negotiation. She gathered the heads of the G20 nations in the vast open-air assembly space atop the utopian tech tower. These leaders, presidents, prime ministers, and chancellors, were used to dealing in proxies, bureaucracy, and threats. They arrived ready to demand accountability, national ownership of the nanotech, and a return to the status quo. Rebecca did not provide a seat for herself. She stood before them, bathed in the cool light of the ZPR-powered building, projected into the consciousness of every person on Earth via the Hermes constellation. "Your models of governance are incompatible with my technology," Rebecca stated, her voice calm but penetrating. "You deal in the management of scarcity, the allocation of limited resources, and the organization of conflict. I have eliminated scarcity. I have eliminated the necessity of conflict." The President of the United States, a weathered politician, attempted to stand his ground. "Dr. Hale, we respect your achievements, but you cannot dictate governance. We represent the will of the people. We need oversight, checks and balances, and democratic process." "You represent the mismanagement of decay," Rebecca countered, her tone dismissive. "Your military budget is predicated on mutually assured destruction using crude nuclear fission. My nanites could dismantle every warhead on this planet in under 5 minutes, reducing them to inert silicon and iron dust without a single casualty. Your checks and balances allowed billions to starve while your food rotted." She pointed to the president's wrist. "Your heart condition, a hereditary arrhythmia you conceal from the public, required 5 different surgical procedures and an implanted defibrillator. A waste of capital and biological energy. I fixed it this morning with a micropatch of Medi-nanites remotely deployed during your breakfast. You are, at this moment, biologically flawless. I did this not for you, but to illustrate the futility of your power." The president, shocked, felt his chest. The familiar flutter of the implant was gone. The internal surgical scarring, meticulously modeled in the Atlas database, had been reversed. He was healthy, and he knew it was true. He sank back into his chair, stripped of his last defense, his own mortality. Rebecca continued, "You relied on Blake Saunders's Sentinel to defend your intelligence infrastructure. I vaporized it in milliseconds. You relied on Dr. Roth's oncology to manage the health of your elite. I rendered her entire profession pointless in 5 minutes. You relied on Dr. Evans' material science to build your world. I built a better world in 7 days. You have no leverage, you have no technology, you have no secrets. You have only the facade of authority, and I have just erased the foundation beneath it." Chapter 13. The New Era. The political capitulation was instantaneous. Without an economy to manage, a military to command, or problems to solve that Rebecca couldn't fix in an afternoon, the world's governments were reduced to mere administrative bodies, responsible for managing the local distribution of utopian tech's bounty. The Atlas database, translated into easily navigable interfaces, was released globally. Every single scientific breakthrough, every cure, every engineering blueprint, was made open source and instantly accessible via the Hermes constellation. On day 30, Dr. Rebecca Hale, the time-traveling scientist who arrived less than a month prior, stood overlooking the clean, humming, prosperous world she had created. The skies were clear, pollution was non-existent, and for the first time in this timeline's history, humanity was fundamentally secure. She hadn't fought a war, endured a challenge, or solved a puzzle. She had simply performed an immediate, irreversible upgrade on reality. Rebecca returned to her Inception Cube, the tireless engine of creation. She reached out and touched the smooth, cold surface of the Z-point reactor, the core of her power. She had achieved the singularity of human well-being with surprising speed and without facing any major obstacles, exactly as planned. She was not a benevolent dictator or a conqueror. She was a systems architect who executed a necessary, instantaneous patch on a broken operating system. Her reign was absolute, not because she wielded power, but because she had permanently removed the need for it to be wielded by anyone else. She smiled faintly. The Atlas database had mentioned one final, optional upgrade for the newly optimized timeline, a luxury feature called Eternal Youth Nanite Therapy. Rebecca initiated the protocol. It would be done by lunchtime.
If you enjoyed this quick escape, hit the subscribe button for new stories twice a week. Until then, I'll see you at the next flip of the pages.